Hello guys, I'm Shani and you have started watching the Mathemagician presented to you by IGCSE. The topic for today, as you can read, is coordinate geometry. So, let's start. Coordinate geometry is basically on Cartesian graph. So, we'll just quickly brush up our skills of plotting points on the Cartesian graph and henceforth move on from there. As you can see here, the Cartesian graph can be divided into 4 quadrants: quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. In the center here, where these two lines intersect, right, the horizontal and the vertical line can be marked out as the origin point or 0, 0. The horizontal line is also referred to as the x-axis and the vertical line will be referred to as the y-axis. Right? Now, when this x-axis and this y-axis intersect, that will be our origin point or the center point for this graph. And as you go right on the horizontal line or the x-axis, you can see the simple number line rules are followed. As you go towards the right, you will see positive numbers in increasing order because you are moving right from the center, or 0. And as you move towards the left on the horizontal line, you will see left from 0, right? You will see negative numbers. The same applies for the vertical line or the y-axis. As you move upwards from 0 or from the center, you will see positive numbers in increasing order. And as you go below, you will see negative numbers. Quadrant 1 is going to be where x and y both are positive. If you see on this, right, it's on right and top, meaning right meaning values on x-axis are positive, top meaning values on the y-axis are positive. Quadrant 2 is on the left top, on the left hand side of 0, the horizontal line or the x-axis will give you negative values. But because it's above 0, the y-axis or the vertical line still keeps giving positive values. Quadrant 3 or left bottom, right here, because it's on the left hand side of 0, you will see negative values on x-axis, and because it's towards the bottom of 0, right, you will see negative values on the y-axis too. Quadrant 4, as you can see, is towards the bottom of 0, so y values will be negative. But because it is towards the right of 0, the x values become positive, right? So x and y both will be positive as you move right and up from 0. X will be negative, y will be positive as you go left and up, right, from 0. Quadrant 3, x and y both negative because it's left and bottom. Quadrant 4, x positive, y negative. This way you can remember and also verify what points are you marking, because next thing that we'll look into is marking points on the Cartesian graph. Let's take a few random examples. Let's say I want to mark out the point 2, 3, right? Let's pick one negative. Let's say I want to mark out the point -5, 4, right? Let's take one more where both are negative. To mark out -3, -2. When you write the points, you have to keep in mind that the first value will be the x value. The one that comes later is the y value. On the left hand side, you will see your x value, and on the right hand side, you will see your y value. This means that on x, I am looking for the point 2, and on y, I am looking for the point 3. So, simple thing that you can do is you can stretch this straight line up from 2, and you can stretch it towards the right from 3. And where they both meet is going to be your point 2, 3. So let me call it A, right? A 2, 3 is here. 2, 3 again, x value being 2, y value being 3, because that is how we write it. The next point, let me mark it out as point B, right? It's -5, 4. So -5 again being my x value, right? And 4, +4 being my y value. That means I'm looking for intersection between -5 and +4. So again, I'll just keep on stretching a straight line from -5 and +4. And this is where they both meet. So this is my point -5, 4. B. Point C, as you can see, is minus 3 comma minus 2. X value being minus 3, y value being minus 2. Once again, I'll go on stretching this out. Minus 3 and minus 2. This is where they both meet, or the point C. Right? If you see your y value is negative, just stretch the line towards the bottom from the x-axis. And if you see that your y value is positive, right, like in the case of minus 5, stretch the line upwards, because that is where those two will intersect. This you can keep as an initial habit if you're a beginner or new to this. Right? Later on, you will see you don't get the room or the time to stretch these lines and mark out your coordinates when they intersect. And with practice, you'll realize you don't even need to do this. You can just, with the help of your eye, mark out where the point may fall. For example, if I take 3 comma minus 3, let it be point B. Right? So I can just look on my x-axis, this is where 3 is. On my y-axis, this is where negative 3 is. And this is where these two will meet. So this could be 3 comma negative 3 or point D. Let's try one more. Let's say point E. Right? Let me call it 3 comma 5. Let it be 3 comma 5. Right? So again, just with the help of the eye, you can see 3 comma 5. This is where 3 on the x and 5 on the y would meet, and this could be my point E, or 3 comma 5. Right? Also, along with this video, I'll attach a worksheet wherein you can practice more of plotting points in the Cartesian graph, so that the later topics would be very easy and you won't have to really spend time on this, given that you are new to this. So the next topic here is the gradient or the slope of a straight line. The gradient or the slope of a straight line tells us about how steep or slant is the straight line on the Cartesian graph, and hence its behavior could be studied based on that. Let's see, what does this mean? Let's say if I have 2 points, points A and point B, right? Now firstly here, if I want to mark out, right, where is point A? On the x-axis, you can see it's on 2, and on the y-axis, it's at 5. So A is 2 comma 5, right? X comma y. B, if you see, is 6 and 15. 6 on x-axis, 15 on y-axis. So B can be marked out as 6 comma 15. But here the challenge is, if I call it x and y, then I may get confused later on, because both the points are x and y. So let me call this x2, y2, and let me mark this point out as x1, y1. Simply because point A was our first point, I'll call it x1, y1, and point B was our second point, I'll call it x2, y2. Now, which actually gives me my values? x1 being 2, y1 being 5, x2 being 6, and y2 being 15, as we can see here. How will this come handy? This practice really comes handy of marking out coordinates as x1, y1 and x2, y2, because this is the formula for the gradient or the slope, and you will realize that if you mark out your coordinates as x1, y1 and x2, y2, then on, it is simply putting it into the formula to find out the gradient, because the gradient formula is m equals to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Right? If you know your values, here I can see y2 being 15, x2 being 6, y1 being 5, x1 being 2. All I'll do is I'll substitute these values, y2 being 15, y1 being 5, x2 being 6, x1 being 2. 15 minus 5 gives me 10, 6 minus 2 gives me 4, right? Simpler version of this fraction would be 5 by 2, and in decimals would be 2.5. You can mark your answer out as 5 by 2 or 2.5, depending upon whether you are more comfortable with fractions or whether, if you like, decimals. Now, what does this gradient actually do? This value is 2.5. So now what? What is this 2.5? So, to think of it mathematically, it can be thought of as how much of change will be seen in the y values when x changes by positive 1. So every time I see a change of positive 1 in my x values, right, how much will my y value change? This, the gradient can tell me. So here the gradient of 2.5 with no sign is positive sign, right? Meaning it tells me that a change of 2.5 in my y values can be seen whenever there is a change of positive 1 in my x values. Still, let's try to understand this in a better way. For example, here I can see the point 2 for x. If I add 1 here, right, which means a positive 1, a change of positive 1 in my x values, and now my new x value will be 3. Y was 5. You will see a change of 2.5 in y whenever x changes by positive 1 because this was our gradient value. Meaning, the new y value will be 7.5. Meaning the line adjoining the points A and B from 2, 5 to 6, 15 will also hold this point 3, 7.5. Right? 3, 7.5 will also be a part of this line. And if I extend this further, if I go on adding one more, value to x, x becomes 4. And again a change of positive 2.5 can be seen in y if x changes by 1 because that is what our gradient was, which gives me 4, 10. So 4, 10 is also going to be a part of this line. Let's try to verify. On x, this is 4. On y, this is 10. If you see, the line exactly passes from the point where these two intersect. So this is one more point on my line, right, which is 4, 10. So we already have 3, 7.5, 4, 10. In the next point, if you extend this further, plus 1 and plus 2.5, it would be 5, 12.5. Right? So the next point here would be 5, 12.5, which will also be a part of this line. This line ending on B, which is 6, 15. Now if you see, the gradient would make much more sense. As x increases by positive 1, y increases by the value of the gradient. And signs do matter. If this was negative 2.5, I would be subtracting 2.5 from the given y value, which is 5. Right? So from 2, as the x goes to 3, y goes from 5 to 7.5. As x goes from 3 to 4, y goes from 7.5 to 10. As x goes from 4 to 5, y goes from 10 to 12.5. And as x goes from 5 to 6, y goes from 12.5 to 15. Right? So simple rule of marking out my coordinates as x1, y1 and x2, y2 help me figure out my gradient because henceforth it would just be putting it into the formula which is m equals to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. M because the gradient or the slope of a straight line is denoted by the English letter m here. Right? Here I have taken one more example. Let's say if there are 2 points 3, 5 and 6, 11. Right? How would I find the gradient for this? The first thing that I would do is I would mark out the coordinate A, right, as 3, 5 and the coordinate B as 6, 11. I will let this 3, 5 be x1, y1 and I will let this 6, 11 be x2, y2. Right? So y2 being 11, x2 being 6, I just have to replace it here in the formula which will be 11, right? Minus y1 which is 5 and 6 which is x2 minus x1 which is 3 because these coordinates are like this x1 y1 and x2 y2. So 11 minus 5 is a 6 and 6 minus 3 is a 3. Breaking it down further would give me 2 by 1 or 2. Meaning the gradient of this line which adjoins the point A and point B on the Cartesian graph is 2, a positive 2. And the gradient of positive 2 means that every time you try to change x by 1, the y value will change by a positive 2. Let's try this. Let's put this to test here. We have the point 3, 5. If I increase x by 1, y is supposed to increase by 2. Meaning if x goes from 3 to 4, y should go from 5 to 7, right? Let's try this once more. If x goes from 4 to 5, y should furthermore increase 2, meaning it goes from 7 to 9. And if x goes from 5 to 6, y goes from 9 to 11, right? This helps me verify my answer. Why? Because we have been already told that point A is 3, 5 and point B is 6, 11, right? And as I tried to reach to x value 6, I saw that my y value is 11. Simply following this logic that every time if x increases by 1, y must increase by 2 if the gradient value is 2. Likewise, if the gradient value was negative 2, means that y changes by negative 2 as x increases by 1. Right? So you just go on subtracting 2 instead of adding 2 if your y values or the gradient value were negative.